about that with you all today. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Sarah. And Jacqueline, if you could share some of your experiences.
Hello, I'm Jacqueline, and I participated in the India immersion trip with the College of Business in 2017, which was in January. And then I also participated in the Chile immersion, which was more of a exchange rather than like a faculty-led. So those were very different experiences, but both very great. And just as Sarah said, well, I was part of the College of Business, and I graduated with my marketing degree in 2018.
Great, thank you so much for sharing, Jackie. And Tyler, you could share a little bit of your background and your experiences as well.
Sure thing. Well, super excited to be here, and thank y'all all for taking time in this. It's awesome to see so many students interested in studying abroad. I also studied, like the rest of the panelists, at UTSA as a part of the College of Business, and I'm actually still there as a graduate student. And in my time at UTSA, I studied in Spain, China, Costa Rica, and India. Clearly, I loved studying abroad, did programs with several different schools, so have a lot to share on those different experiences, but it was a huge part of my life and shaped me into who I am today. So really happy to share whatever insights I can with you all today.
Great, thank you, Tyler. And yeah, that's actually a really common experience. Once students sort of start studying abroad, kind of spread their wings a little bit, it becomes a recurring experience. They're more open to travel, more open to seeing the world a little bit more. So it's a really great experience to really expand your horizons and to give you the capacity to even further want to expand your horizons. So I'm going to start with a few questions. Anyone could feel free to answer this. I would encourage the multiple panelists to answer the same question, just to hear different perspectives on everything. So to start off with, what's something you would have liked to know before studying abroad? Let me call someone out. Let's do Jackie.
One of the things I would have liked to know was maybe go a little bit more deeper into the culture. We did have, as part of the preparation of going to India, we did have a class, a few classes before we left to get our mind more of what it was going to be like to be there. But whenever I went to Chile, it was more of, we didn't have as much preparation in that side, like culture-wise. My parents are originally from Mexico, so I was imagining it would be a lot more like my background, which is like a lot of like Hispanic, Mexican background. But although it was kind of similar, there was a lot of differences in even the way that they communicate with each other. So maybe knowing that, especially because this trip was more of our own, it wasn't faculty-led as much as the one that I had been previously on, which was India. So this one was more of us getting along, getting around by ourselves and trying to get along with everyone there.
Great, thank you for that, Jackie. And Tyler, was there anything you wanted to know before you studied abroad?
Yeah, I think honestly what comes to mind, I think I'm going to take a different angle at this. I wish I would have lost the initial perspective I had that studying abroad was expensive. And what I mean by that is there's definitely a price to study abroad, but I really didn't realize how many different funding options there are. So generally the program itself, any of the programs that I participated in, they had scholarships. I know the Office of Studying Abroad at UTSA also has scholarship opportunities along with a ton of external ones, and that I had actually pursued and was able to get. And I think leading up to that, I had just thought studying abroad was always like super expensive, not really affordable for somebody like me. But I wish I knew and kind of got over that stigma earlier, because there is a lot of funding options for these opportunities.
Great. Yeah, I'm actually glad you mentioned that. That's actually a really interesting direction to take. UTSA offers a lot of funding opportunities, so I'm gonna go ahead and share our funding page on the chat. But a lot of students do think that maybe it's not accessible to them. But in fact, it is quite accessible. And in the last year, a third of the students who studied abroad through UTSA did rely on some form of financial assistance. So don't think that funding is really a disqualifier. It's not at all. Study abroad over the years has moved to be very accessible to most of the student population. And there's a lot of opportunities that we'd be happy to walk through with you. And certain offices that are specifically founded just to help students find these awards and fellowships. So, Sarah, is there anything you would have liked to know before studying abroad?
Yeah, definitely. So a few things I think are mostly just like the difference in cultural norms, especially the ones that like contrast mostly with habitual norms that we're used to in our own home country. So those can be big or small, but like a small example of that for me was like when I was abroad in China, I wasn't aware before going that like cold water at restaurants isn't really a thing. People will always drink like hot water because it's good for digestion. And so we'd be walking in the heat and we'd want cold water at the whenever we're ready to have our lunch or dinner, and it wasn't readily available. So I think just becoming aware of those differences prior, just so that you have a plan for like adapting or a plan to go around it, is good prior to going. Like I said, that's a small example, but we did do many courses and or like presentations to dive deeper into different aspects of the culture as it relates to business, especially. I guess we'll talk more about that in the further into the call, but yeah, that's definitely something I would have liked to know prior.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And that's really neat, right? When you go into other cultures, a lot of things you sort of take for granted in your own culture is kind of flipped and 180'd when you go somewhere else. And not in necessarily a negative sense or fashion, but just that cultures around the world just develop in such great ways that we never would have even thought of or imagined in the first place. And that's because we're sort of in our bubble growing up. And that's why study abroad is so important and vital to a lot of students or just individuals. Just experiencing things is really great when it's outside of your bubble. And looks like we have a question in the chat. Regarding the price, will my UTSA tuition cover most of the cost for studying abroad? Yeah, so a lot of programs are quite comparable in price to UTSA tuition, especially when you add scholarships on top of them. For example, our exchange programs, you're paying UTSA tuition to take classes and be an exchange student at one of the other institutions we have in Asia, Europe, Latin America. And so the cost is clearly comparable just because you are paying UTSA tuition. The only difference would be the flight, but by stacking the insurance, stacking the scholarship opportunities through UTSA, the Gilman, things like that, anything that's available to you, you could actually lower the cost to where it's more affordable to study abroad than it is to study domestically. And it's about taking advantage of those opportunities, and that's why we're here to help you find those. That was a great question, Sebastian. So, going down some more, another question we have is what best prepared you for study abroad? And if I could bring it back to Sarah again.
Yeah. So what best prepared me is definitely the pre-departure presentations that were all assigned to me and the 20 of my peers that also came on the trip. So I did briefly mention that before, but um, I guess every presentation was very different. So like mine in particular had to do with the banking sector and financial market of China. So I got to learn more about the economy, and while my peers dived deeper into the culture and social norms and the history of China, and we all got to present to each other. And that was, just a lot of training for all of us to go through over the 2-3 weeks that we were preparing for that. So I think that that's what best prepared me, because I was just very aware of, I just became very aware of things that I wasn't previously um, aware of, obviously. But yeah, that's definitely the biggest thing for me.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. The pre-departure orientation we have at UTSA is quite robust. We kind of go over possible scenarios. We go over our insurance. We go over services that are available to you. So it's very helpful to students, and it really works to put them at ease. But also at the same time, make sure they're aware of kind of situations that could happen abroad and what to do in those cases. And we do prioritize the safety of our students very seriously, and having an in-depth discussion about it is very important before you leave. So, Jackie, what best prepared you to study abroad?
So just like Sarah mentioned, the pre-departure meetings that we had with our groups, like for India and then for Chile, we had those presentations about like culture, background, like everyone had a different subject that they had to go research into, and we all shared it with each other. But also a very helpful thing for me was be able to reach out to people who had gone previously on the trips, because as these meetings that there are with orientation and the pre-departure meetings, they tell you like the basics of like the culture, background, things that you should know, but also reaching out to previous alumni that had gone on these trips was more of the what to pack or what to expect, what to do, what not to do, what had happened in previous trips. For example, the socks was a big one that they had told us about for India. So, or also like movies to watch or books to read about what to expect and how to better prepare going into that country, so that we didn't go in there blindly and do things that you're not supposed to do and it's not acceptable in that culture.
Great. Thank you for that, Jackie. And also sort of mentioning reaching out to previous study abroad alumni to really get help and sort of insight on your trip. That is something we offer. We connect students if they request with other students who have maybe studied abroad in the same country or maybe the same program, really just to get that student insight, that relatability, right? I'm a little bit too old to be talking to students about study abroad. So with my personal experiences. So having that relatable experience from directly from students is really valuable, and that's why we sort of are hosting this session as well, because it's shown that students do understand each other better, and they're able to ask the questions and concerns when it relates to other students, and the conversation is a lot more organic. So we really try to push that as well. So Tyler, what best prepared you to study abroad?
Yeah, so just adding on to what's already been said in those pre-departure meetings and the orientations, really asking questions. So I think, especially for whenever it's somebody's first time, I know I was like that. You think of like the millions of things that can go wrong, and they're throwing a bunch of information at you. And so for me, it was asking those questions, and sometimes I know I was very self-conscious of asking questions. So just listening to the questions that some of my peers were asking, because that could be valuable as well. Because the reality is, the nerves that you're feeling, somebody else is feeling too. So just listening to kind of the responses by the faculty leads or whoever's leading orientation, I know that made me feel a lot more comfortable. And then just accepting that, you know, you're going with the school, you have some sense of organization, you have support there, and just knowing that everything's going to be okay. I think that's what really prepared me.
Great. Thank you for that, Tyler. And we do have another question in the chat. Do you guys suggest one type of program over another? I mean, specifically summer programs versus semester programs. So maybe y'all can talk about what how y'all came to your choice of program, or if you went on multiple programs, maybe do a compare and contrast between the two.
I think I could definitely speak on that one. First off, I would say it really depends on your situation and what you want to do. I know for me, at first, I was really big on doing internships in the summer, and those shorter programs really aligned with that. But if I could do it all over again, and how much that I love studying abroad, I would have definitely done a semester and make that fit. I mean, I tried to make it fit, but at that time it was like I was about to graduate. It was not possible. So it really depends on your situation. But if I was in your shoes, I would go big. So go for that semester one. And then if not, you know, try to fit in those short-term ones wherever you can.
Well said, Tyler. Did anyone else want to tackle that question?
For me, it was also, well, it wasn't specifically of whether to do like a semester or a summer program. I went during like the small break for the winter break. So it was like the 2 week, well, it was 1 week before classes started and 1 week into the semester. But it was more, for me, my decision was that I wanted to go to India. It wasn't necessarily that, the program, I mean, like the time. Well, it was also the time because it was right before classes and it wouldn't be like interfering with the rest of the semester. And even though we did have to miss that first week of class, we did let our professors know for the spring semester that we were going to be away for that first week. And we were given the assignments then. And then for the summer one, since I didn't take any summer courses, like I didn't have any requirements that I need to take then, the Chile one fit perfectly in that time, as I was able to do a whole month during the summer going there, and it didn't interfere with my degree of delaying my graduation.
Great, thank you for that, Jackie. And Sarah, did you want to chime in on maybe why you chose your program?
Yeah, so just to add to that, I did do a 2-week program with UTSA, and after graduation, I interned for a month in Spain. So although my experiences were quite short, I think that because it's so short, there's naturally a lot like that's jammed into it. So it's a lot happening at once, and I feel like a lot of the development comes from like the reflection that comes after that time spent abroad. So for me, although I gained a lot from like a short trip, I would have liked to stay longer, perhaps for like a semester, to actually be able to dive a little deeper into the region, the culture, learn more, perhaps even learn more from the language. That would have definitely been a great experience, and it's something that I'm even interested in doing when pursuing higher education too. So, yeah.
Great, thank you for sharing that, Sarah. So yeah, it really just goes back to once you travel, you want to travel more, right? A lot of sort of the past, a lot of the feedback just now was these alumni wish they traveled longer, maybe joined a longer program. So it's just such a rewarding experience. You really don't want to leave, right? So it's really neat. So maybe it's something you want to look into. But I do encourage students. There's nothing wrong with short-term programs as well. Maybe something you want to give it a shot, maybe test things out, and maybe you could come back for a longer term. So thank you for the input. So for my next question, Sara, how do you feel study abroad has changed you?
Yeah, so study abroad has definitely impacted my life in many ways, but I think what the way it's changed me most is like it's made me more eager to gain like professional and academic experience abroad. I feel like as a kid, when I think about my life, I always thought about it where I was, where I was in the moment. But I think one trip leading to another allowed me to like visualize like a future where I can continue this. Um, and also just the way that you've experienced like self-growth on study abroad um, has definitely been huge. Like I think the growth that comes with studying abroad is pretty profound. So that in itself has helped. Also with my appreciation for like people and cultures, I've grown really interested in that, especially from studying abroad. My willingness to put myself in new situations and adapt and kind of move forward with like no judgments and wanting to like learn and understand people. That's definitely been something that's impacted me that I feel I gained through studying abroad.
Great, thank you. And Jackie, how do you feel like studying abroad has changed you?
Definitely, especially the India trip, I think it changed me the most because that was the first time that I ever traveled outside the country. Well, we like with my family, we would always travel to Mexico, but it's very different. It was the first time that I was traveling alone, especially like overseas. So that really impacted me, as I saw India is a very different culture from anything that here in the US or Mexico. There's a lot of poverty, so I got a lot of more insight and understanding of how other around the world, how they live, how they get along. One thing that really like impacted me was how humble they are. Whenever we were in that first week in Hyderabad, it was we were traveling on bus, and I can't remember exactly where it was, but we were traveling by like down a road, and it was like all these little kids playing outside, no toys, no anything. They were just playing like with the dirt, and like they look super happy. So that really impacted me of how grateful I am with how we live here. And eventually I would like to do something that to help these underdeveloped countries and like help other charities to be able to better lives of like these kids, how happy they were, but at the same time, how grateful I am to be where I am today.
Well said, Jackie. Thank you for sharing that. And Tyler, how do you feel like studying abroad has changed you?
Sure. So I feel for me, it's really opened my mind, and kind of elaborating on that, it not only changed my perspective, but really challenged my perspective. Just being honest, I was born and raised here in San Antonio. I had traveled domestically like a few times, and just the, American way is, we're the best at everything. And that's what kind of my initial thoughts were. It's changed a lot since then. And kind of when I studied abroad, it really made me kind of question different things, reflect on different things. I know Sarah had brought that up. It just kind of happens when you put yourself out of your comfort zone, and it's still something that continues to challenge my perspectives. Something else, it's also enabled me to travel more. So because of these programs, I love traveling. So in a pre-pandemic area, it's often where a lot of my money goes to. I joke that I'm an avid budget traveler, and I just really love seeing the world, and it's all about learning from these new cultures and communities, and meeting people. And I think the last thing I'll share is that something that really changed me, and I try to bring it into my like everyday life, is at the end of the day, people are people regardless of what backgrounds they come from, and wherever they're located. I know the kindness of the people and communities I was in whenever I studied abroad is still something that has amazed me till this day. I can't even speak enough on that. And it's just a friendly reminder that at the end of the day, we are just people. So I think that's one of the biggest things for me.
Great, thank you, Sally. Yeah, all this input really makes it sound study abroad is definitely such a meaningful and life-changing experience for everyone involved. I've never had a student really come back from a trip and say it was okay, or I wish I spent my time somewhere else, or it was just like another weekend or something. It was always such a drastic change from their perspective on the worldview that they really come back effectively, just different people with new perspectives along with them. So we do have a question in the chat from Alyssa. Are you limited to how many times you can study abroad during your college career? So that seems more directed towards me, so I'll go ahead and answer that one. So there's no real limit to studying abroad. The only limitation would be, if anything, maybe your degree plan, if you don't have any time to fit that in, like sort of how Tyler mentioned earlier. But aside from that, we've had students study abroad multiple times. I think the current high score right now, we had a student who studied abroad 7 times while she was a UTSA student. So she was very much more of a global student and a global citizen rather than just restricted to UTSA. So that was a really neat opportunity. So let's see. The question from Alexis: can student loans help cover costs? Yes, definitely. So financial aid could be applied to your study abroad as well as loans. The way to get those applied is really just to have your classes verified and transferred back as transferable credit back to UTSA, and that's a conversation you need to have with your academic advisor. Just meet with them, and they'll petition the courses. You just need to tell them what courses you're going to take, where you're going to take them, and sort of the syllabus for the course, just to see if they're comparable or equivalent to any UTSA programs. And that's something your department will check with in conjunction with your advisor. So it's definitely possible. We do recommend students do that way in advance just so they know what their funding situation looks like, and of course to find out if their classes will transfer back. Great. Let's see. Oh, we're getting a good amount of questions now. Let's see. Hannah. Hannah asked, is there a year that is best for studying abroad, like sophomore year versus junior year? So I'll leave it to the panelists, but to start with, it really depends on your situation and what you're looking to do. Uh, what I've noticed is the earlier you decide to study abroad, the more options you have in terms of elective credits and things like that. As you go further into your academics and your degree plan, your classes do become a little bit more niche, a little bit more department specific. So it may be more difficult to find classes like that. But of course, we've had students study abroad from all ranges. Did any of the panelists want to maybe talk about why they chose to study abroad for their year?
Yeah, I will chime in and add to that and say that I definitely encourage people to study abroad sooner than later, just because I think that it does a lot for refining our goals, especially professional goals. And that's just based on my own experience. I did study abroad it was the summer of my, after my junior year, so I was going to become a senior. And that allowed a lot of revelations for where I saw myself post graduation. So it would have been, I think, given the opportunity, nice to kind of have that sooner. Of course, I was given the opportunity, but I just wasn't even aware of it until my junior year. So if you are able to do it sooner, I definitely recommend that.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Did anyone else want to chime in on that? If not, we
Yeah,
could. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to echo what Sarah said. The sooner the better is the common theme that you'll hear from anybody who's studied abroad. But I also want to say it's never too late. So the first time I studied abroad, it was when, same time as Sarah, it was that summer going into my senior year. And my advisor didn't like it, but I was able to squeeze in 2 more study abroad programs before graduation. I did one during the winter break, similar to Jackie, and then I did another one that next summer, finishing off my degree. So the sooner the better, but wherever you can squeeze it in, if you want to do it, I don't think it's ever too late, but it's at least never too late to try.
Great, thank you. Let's see, did you want to add into that, Jackie?
I would just say the same. The sooner the better. I did mine. Trying to think. I think it was junior year. I did India in the winter break of my junior year, and then Chile right after my junior year. That summer going into senior year. So yes, the sooner the better, especially so that you have more opportunities, and you can. If you do decide to do one, maybe like your sophomore year, you still have time probably to fit in another one, even if it's a short trip later on, either your junior or senior year.
Great, thank you, Jackie. And it looks like we have a really good question from Washington in the chat. How did you gain the support of your parents to go to another country on your own?
For me personally, for India, I applied before telling my parents. I knew they were probably going to say no. So I decided to apply. I did my application, and then they were actually in Mexico whenever I got the notice that I was accepted. So I called them knowing that they were in Mexico and they weren't going to say anything to me because I was already going to make the whole payment. They were a little scared, especially because I had never traveled on my own, and they were just a little nervous, especially right whenever I left. The cell phone service wasn't the best going to India, especially for my first time being abroad. So that made them a little scared, but they understood that this was for like my own good, and this was something that I really wanted to do. So they accepted it, even up to the point where I left. But even like the whole time that I was there, cell phone was not great at all, even though we thought we had cell phone service, but cell phone service wasn't always the best there. But once I decided, I told them that I was going to go to Chile, they were completely for it. They saw the outcome of whenever I came back from India, how it had changed me, how I saw things, and understood that this was for the best. So I think just having them know that that was going to go, but it was all good.
Yeah, I'll add to that as well, and say that I kind of had the same experience. I applied first and I waited to see my result before like telling them, because I figured that it would be harder for them to say no if I was already accepted. And of course, I think most of all, our parents, like, of course, they want the best for us. They just want to ensure our safety and ensure that this is something that's good for us. So I would encourage you to share what the program consists of, share more with them about the faculty that might be going with you, if it's UTSA led, or maybe the academics that and like courses that you would take. Just showing them what you're looking at so that they can also see all the credibility behind it. And for me, it was sharing with my parents, like, that there was like trained faculty that have done this multiple years, and um, showing what like education abroad at UTSA has done for students. So that naturally made them like more comfortable with the program, and they're like, oh, that's awesome. So I think, yeah, our parents, they might not be as fully aware as you are with all the research that you've been doing. So sharing that research with them could be useful.
Great, thank you for that, Sarah. And let's see, did you have to get any support from your parents, Tyler, when it came to studying abroad?
I'm a little stubborn, so my thing was I was gonna do it anyways. But kind of echoing some of the things that Sarah said, I think parents do have just the best intentions, and it's just that concern. So for me, it was providing them with the resources and the numbers for the university, as well as the numbers and stuff for the faculty lead. I don't think they ever needed that, but just providing them with as much resources as I could to give them that sense of comfort. And then I know when I did go abroad, given their concerns, I did have a cell phone plan, and I just did check-ins with them. And that was really for the first time I studied abroad. After that, they got a lot more comfortable, because you are going with the school. So there's just a ton of support around the programs generally. It's probably the safest way and most affordable way to do traveling. So I think they eventually got just comfortable with everything.
Great, thank you, Tyler, and thank you, Washington. That was a great question. When it comes to studying abroad, we do recommend you having that open dialogue with your parents. Maybe just communicating with them, letting them know. The last thing you'd want abroad is having them blow up an international phone. That would be a little bit difficult in terms of the bills. But having that honest dialogue is nice. Of course, at this point you are adults, but we always recommend kind of just keeping open communication with your loved ones. They do care about you, and they do want to know what's going on, and they do have your best interests at heart. So, moving forward, Sebastian asked, I'm thinking of doing an internship abroad. Can you explain what that's like in general if you can? Well, I'll explain it a bit on just UTSA side. So with internships abroad, we have a lot of providers that help with that. And when it comes to internships, you'd be applying with one of these companies, and then they would go ahead and check with their contacts in the country. So you'll be linked up with a company or organization overseas or abroad, and then they'll link you up based on sort of your interests and what field you're looking to work into. Um, for our panelists, did anyone else look into an internship, and what was your experience with it?
Yeah, so I did an internship, but it was after graduation. Um, but that internship was initially sparked by my experience studying abroad with UTSA. Because after my trip to China, I was like, I absolutely have to do this again in a more professional sense. So I guess to share a little bit about that, it was just a month overseas in Barcelona. I worked with a leading startup where I did consulting for them. So it was basically like a fellowship, and it was a marketing strategy consulting. So we worked with the startup to my project specifically had to do with their content management, like internal and external. Some of my peers were working on financial projects. So there were different categories depending on like our field of study. And that's very similar to what like internships offered through UTSA would consist of. They really work with you and what you're looking for to help you refine your skills and gain experience in that field. So that's definitely a great thing to look into. And it's also something that you can do after a study abroad. So if you want to have like a second international experience, I definitely recommend following up with an internship.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And that was a great question. Let's see. Moving forward, we have another question from Tramai. On average, how much free time do we get, like opportunities to explore the area? Did anyone want to provide insight into that?
It definitely depends on the type of program that you're in. For the first one that I did, it was more of, there wasn't much of our own. We were always like in a group, either like we were in little groups, but never alone to really explore, like let's say take a taxi or anything to go explore on our own. But the second one that I did was basically we were there by ourselves. We had class from like 9 to 1, and then 1 to the rest of the day you were on your own. So you could go explore the whole city. That's what I would usually do right after class. I would take the metro, go either to like the zoo, the city center, like always exploring what there was to the city.
Yeah, likewise. I think there's a lot of time that's allocated for whether it's like the academics or like professional side, and then a lot of time for your cultural, interaction and immersion. So it definitely does depend on the program, like Jackie mentioned, but it is there's definitely enough time in the month. I think the month that I was interning, it was almost like after work every day we would just try to explore somewhere new. Like we'd take the metro and try to visit new sites, and that was after like a certain time frame of working, of course. But like during the UTSA trip in China, we had schedules throughout the day, and then we would end like in the evening, so we always knew when we were going to end and could plan ahead for like our own free time. So those yeah, although it's like a lot going on, you definitely had your time. I remember we even had like a whole day at one point for our own uh, free time, which was nice because we had done so much when it came to like company visits and university lectures and stuff. So that's definitely allowed and encouraged.
Yeah, I would also just say that it does depend on the program. So within my 4 programs, I know 2 of them were kind of like very much, I would say, on a hybrid form. So like half of the day was lectures or visits to different businesses, and then the second half of the day was completely open. Then I had one of my trips, my China one. That one we had a lot of free time. And then the other trip I had in Costa Rica, that one was a lot more strict, and there wasn't a lot of free time on that trip. But I think it's a really good question to ask. And as you're looking into study abroads, like definitely look at those itineraries to see if that is something, like to make sure it's a fit for you. Because I know for me that free time is important, just having that space just for myself if I need it to rest, or oftentimes what I use to explore. But at the same time, even on those ones with really tight schedules, if you really want to go explore, you can make time. Got to get up a little early, but you can explore in the morning, sometime in the evenings. Really depends where you're at though on that piece. But yeah.
Great, thank you for sharing those experiences. So let's see. So we have another question regarding internships. Do you know if internships abroad provide housing and stuff, or am I on my own? So for that, that would really depend on the program. All programs across the board sort of have varied housing. It really depends on the program itself. But at the very least, every program does offer suggestions on housing, either nearby or maybe good spots that students have used in the past. So even if they don't facilitate it through the cost or directly link you with the housing institution, they'll at least provide recommendations on where to stay that's nearby or convenient for your study abroad or internship. Thank you for asking that, Sebastian. And we have a question here from Hannah. Do y'all have any tips for us once we're in the country we choose to study in? It's a great question.
That's an awesome question, Hannah. And I will add to that, just because I'm really eager to share about it. But I have spoke with many students who have studied abroad, and they do share some things that or some tips on this question in particular. So like I have my own, and I feel like I've gathered some. So basically, the biggest thing would to really be to try your best to integrate into the culture. So to not be that person that goes abroad and eats all this like American foods, or like doesn't expand as much, or like go meet locals and like stays within their like international groups of like the people they traveled with. Like I feel like that really dampens the experience, and doesn't it just it's not taking full advantage of it. So my biggest tip for people traveling to the country that they choose to study in is definitely to do your best when it comes to meeting locals, or like trying the foods there, learning about the culture, the history, if they have a specific religion, to like just maybe even learn about that, how people think, and expanding on like your intercultural skills mostly. But yeah, it's to break out of that shell.
I would also add definitely what Sarah said, but also know maybe a little bit of the transportation in the city, because whenever I was in Chile, the metro is like the main thing how to get around the city. But obviously they close like during the week. I don't remember if it's during the week or during the weekend. They close a lot earlier, maybe like around 9 or 10. So if you're out, you need to be able to get back home. So just know what type of transportation you're going to be able to call, because whenever I was there, Uber is illegal. There is Uber there, but it's illegal. The taxis there don't want them there. So you always have to act like you know the person that's driving you. Like you always go in the front seat, you don't go in the back seat, things like that. And then there's also a lot of safety issues with Uber, because since they are illegal, if they see that you're not actually someone that's knows the driver, they might like go after you and things like that. So just make sure you understand like transportation or things. Just do a little research of what you shouldn't do and what you need to do if you are going to do them.
Yeah, and kind of building off of what Jackie just said about transportation, I think that's so huge. And what I was going to say, I think my biggest tip, especially when you're traveling with like the university, and this one's kind of hard, but don't just go with the flow. And so what I mean by that is, since the whole thing is so organized, the faculty leads will take care of all transportation. They'll tell you exactly what to do, and you could just do exactly as what they say, with everything just being over your head, which is completely fine. That's what I did the first time around. But then when it came to free time, I had no idea how to use the trains. I didn't know what I was even interested in going to. And so like my advice is, whenever you are, on the train, and the faculty, they go through it, like see at like what tickets are they buying, look at what line you're getting on, because generally the first one's always going to be near your hotel or your accommodation. See where that line takes you, use your phone to look at your maps. And doing this, I guarantee you it will really prepare you for that free time. And then for me, I think that's the biggest thing that's enabled me to be so comfortable with traveling, because once you kind of learn it in one place, you learn to just adapt more wherever you go. And then I think the second piece I want to add to that, and it kind of touches on what Sarah shared, but talking to like the locals and even the faculty on like places to go, things to do. And even if that's something that you researched before, like if there's a place you really want to go to and you know it's somewhat near your accommodations or the university you're staying at, bringing that to your faculty, and oftentimes, especially if there is the time, they'll help you make that happen. And same thing with locals, like they'll help you with make those experiences happen if that makes sense. So yeah, just really being open and trying to make the most of your time while you're there.
Yeah. One quick thing I'll also add to that is to be aware of like the politics of the country you're going into, and just generally what's going on, as it relates to like, you know, whether there's like political tension. You would definitely want to know what you're putting yourself into, or places, certain areas to avoid, um, or mostly just to be aware of like the current events, political or not, just to protect your own self. I do see another question in the chat. Joshua says he's been out of the country a number of times, and this is the first time that they're going to a country where they don't know the language. Any tips for that? Not knowing the language. I think one tip I would have is to definitely keep like backup language translation apps, maybe carry out like notes of like the most used words of that language. I know like a tip that a lot of people use when learning multiple languages is to identify like the top 500 to 1,000 most frequently used words, translate those, and then that becomes a lot easier. So definitely having some resource to utilize to help you translate would be helpful, in my opinion.
And building on that, so when it comes to studying abroad or doing an internship in a country where you don't speak the language at all, typically the program you're a part of has English language instruction. But if you're talking about outside of the program, you really want to explore the country, typically you'll be matched with other students or maybe an on-site staff or director who could navigate the country really well. So I would definitely recommend maybe getting a foothold by kind of staying around them a bit, sort of understanding. And once you kind of do what Tyler mentioned, sort of understand what they're doing, how they're getting by, kind of take those on, and then learn how to navigate on your own after that. So slowly building it up, sort of like training wheels leading up into, you know, personal independent exploration, right? So it's just about sort of just being privy to what your threshold is and what you could handle within exploring the country and being aware of that. But that's a really good question, Joshua. Did anyone else have any other insights or input into that?
Yeah, I actually really love this question because this was my experience almost anywhere that I went. So I have several strategies that can kind of make it more okay. So I think the first one, kind of like Luck just said, having, whether it's that faculty or oftentimes sometimes there is a student that speaks the language, whoever that student is, they are going to be the most popular person in the group, and they are your best friend as far as navigating in free time. But sometimes there isn't that person and you're out on your own. So what had helped me is in my notes, whenever I was in a country, I would really try to learn the basics. And what I would do is I would type out the pronunciations as a trigger for me. So it looks really weird, but it's important to, whenever you're in another country, to try to get the pronunciation right, so they know what you're trying to say. And then the other piece of that is having like using images or like that Google Translate text. Just there's ways that you can navigate those. And sometimes you get lucky and there's people that speak English. I've learned that there's pretty much people that speak English everywhere, but when there's not that, you know, when you don't come across that person, there's still ways to communicate. It's just a little more challenging.
Great. Thank you, Tyler. So we are nearing the end of the hour. We're not closing just yet, but if you have any questions, please put them in the chat or maybe just unmute your mic to ask the panelists. But in the meantime, I would like to ask wha- a really notable culture experience, whether it's dealing with something with sort of the environment, the area, or maybe the local foods, just anything regarding the culture that really stood out to you that you sort of want to bring back, maybe a fun story.
Um, let's see. Okay, I think something unique that I'll mention. It wasn't actually my experience, but it was something that my peers did on the trip. Um, so when we were in China, a few of my friends decided to like go to the silk market and try like different insects and like they described what it was, but it was just really, yeah, creatures that I hadn't heard of before. I'm personally a vegetarian, so I didn't partake in that. But I know that that was a really unique thing for them, and that's a fun story that they always share. So, yeah, I'm sharing that on their behalf.
I guess I can go on that one. There's definitely, I think I've had a lot, and anybody who's studied abroad, I think they have their own unique experiences. But I think one of my best experiences I had, it was actually in my trip to China. So I was in Beijing downtown, and I really had to use the restroom. Um, and I was just trying to find one, and I was with a group of friends, and walked into this place. And I don't know if you've ever been to Vegas, but the place I walked into looked like a casino type of like vibe, and I was like, "Oh, this is so interesting." And so I went to use the restroom, and really loved the restroom and loved the place. So I was like telling my friends, I'm like, "Hey, like check out this like casino place that we are at." And so they came in, and then we were like walking around, just trying to navigate the place, and it looked like there was all these private rooms. Then we just walked into one, and turns out that it was a karaoke, I don't know if you would say bar, but it was all of those rooms were for karaoke. And pretty much what I learned later on is you can rent these rooms. But what had happened was when we'd walked into one of those rooms, there was a group that was like celebrating like somebody's birthday, and they did not speak English. None of us spoke Mandarin, and they invited us to stay, and we ended up doing karaoke with them and had a blast. It was definitely one of the funnest nights that I've had in my life, and it's something that I always remember. And again, just echoing that kindness of random strangers on these trips. So I think that's the story that I have.
No, that's a really neat story. Uh, that's actually really fun. So I kind of want to pop into like random karaoke bars now too. But we have a question in the chat. So what made you want to study abroad? So I guess what was the sparking factor for any of y'all?
For me, it was hearing other peers who had been in these programs. They would talk about it all the time. I was working in the College of Business, and some of my coworkers, they had been on these trips. And so I had been working with them for about a year and a half. And every single person that would come back from this India trip, they were always talking about it. So that's what made me want to participate in that India trip. And then once I had done that trip, I really wanted to, since that was my first trip, I just wanted to keep going. And then I saw the Chile one open up. And although for the College of Business, you're usually only supposed to do one through the College of Business, either in your undergrad and then another one in your grad, I decided to just apply, even though I thought I wasn't going to get in. And so that's why I did that other one, because I just wanted to keep exploring and being able to soak myself in like different cultures.
Yeah, Jackie, that's definitely how it starts. You do one and you just want to continue and carry on. Yeah, for me, it was because I was in a co-ed business fraternity, and in one of our meetings, one of the brothers mentioned that they had studied abroad with the College of Business, and that there were really affordable programs. And like I said, I was a junior when I first heard about it, so I was really shocked to know that I wasn't aware of it prior, because the office was doing such great things for students. So I just learned a lot more about their initiatives and what opportunities they had available, and I got to help advocate for my other, friends and peers to like apply to their programs too, which was neat. And then yeah, not letting me to want to go do the internship after graduation to build my resume and gain more like intercultural skills. And speaking of that, I know we are like getting closer to one, but I do want to just screen share some pictures from, the trips that we're all sharing with you today. I have some images from Tyler, Jackie, and I's trips, and we did share them on the Instagram account, but I'm just gonna screen share that.
And so while Sarah's sharing that, I'll just add my like reason. So I know I was always really curious of studying abroad. I always had this desire to travel. And then what really swayed me was when I did like realize that it was affordable. There was they gave a presentation in one of my College of Business classes and broke down the costs. And I was like, holy cow, that's like way cheaper than I had thought it was. And yeah, and so then I applied, and that's what led to like my first program in Spain. So
But if y'all enjoyed hearing all these stories from our study abroad alumni, feel free to check out our Instagram. We have all these stories, sort of the insights on it, just photos. She really just kind of puts you there. But it looks like they had really great trips, really good selfies of selfies going on. So it's a really good time, and we would love to have y'all's experiences in this after you've gone on your trip, your life-changing experience, and kind of to feature you as well. We have a lot of students doing really cool things out there, really changing the world, really like leaving this impact. We're all about really just spreading our wings and just kind of globalizing the world bit by bit with every one of these trips. But yeah, with all of that, we'll go ahead and start bringing this session to a close. I really do appreciate all of y'all joining, and thank you so much to the panelists, Sada, Jackie, and Tyler, for joining us and hosting this with us. Really do appreciate it. We hope that those in the chat maybe one day would like to take part in this as well, and they'll be in the same spot, sort of passing on their knowledge to future students wanting to study abroad, and really just sharing that light with everyone else. But thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining, everyone. It was really nice to be able to share all this with you and to share the panel space with Jacqueline and Tyler.
Thank you.
thank y'all, and definitely apply and get out there and go study abroad, and best of luck with all of that.
And with that, we'll bring it to a close. We do have one more session happening at 2 o'clock, Navigating Your Identity Abroad, where we talk about studying abroad as a first-gen or Latino student. This session will be hosted by maybe study abroad alumni as well, exploring their identities abroad, just because that is a big idea, right? Well, you're exploring other cultures, but you also have your own identities to navigate while doing so. So we look forward to seeing y'all at 2, and thank you for coming.
Bye, thanks.